The Legend of Zelda and The Adventure of Link both managed to make it to the top-selling NES titles in the late 80s. Both games, the animated series and the Nintendo playing cards, was what brought this Nintendo series under my radar. Within a year of me owning the both NES games and their gloriously unique golden cartridges, Nintendo has entered the 16-bit era, joining the likes of the Sega Genesis and the lesser-known PC Engine, or TurboGrafx-16, as it was known in the US. As a quick side note, a 2-game series on the TurboGrafx that was very fun to play and a notable Zelda clone is Neutopia 1 and 2, with gameplay similar to the original Legend of Zelda. Nintendo releases the Super Famicom in Japan in 1990, therefore transferring Zelda 3 development, as it was called from the Famicom, to the Super Famicom, or in the US, NES to Super NES. The first time Zelda 3 came under my radar was when I received the Super Nintendo for Christmas in the early 90s, and it was teased with a single image on the box called Zelda 3. I also came across a random chapter of a comic in a mid-1992 issue of Nintendo Power called A Link to the Past, and saw Link fight some wizard on top of a castle, and then whisked away to another world, not realizing it was going to be part of Zelda 3. I got the game later that year for my 8th birthday, and this game helped me further develop my reading skills, problem-solving skills in the dungeons, and how to properly play a non-stage-based game, because I was stuck on both previous Zeldas. As I have said in my previous Zelda video, this game was the first Zelda game I ever completed at a real young age, and the payoff at the end is so worth it, surpassing the previous games. Like usual, let's go back in time and see how this game came to be. Zelda 3 started development in the late 80s after the success of The Adventure of Link under the direction of Shigeru Miyamoto as producer and Takashi Tezuka as director. They wanted to incorporate a party system in the new Zelda, featuring new characters working as a team, kind of like in JRPGs of the time, but that was scrapped, focusing on improving Link, the title character. Miyamoto and Tezuka were disappointed with the performance of the original 8-bit Famicom and really wanted to improve Link's movements so that he could walk diagonally, swing a sword instead of simply jabbing like in the original, and wanted to really expand the world, making it the largest game world yet, with a special cartridge that has double the storage size of all the other Super NES games at the time. Due to a major increase in budget for this project, Miyamoto and Tezuka were able to implement a lot of the ideas explored, but due to time constraints they had to abandon some ideas like the ability to cause wildfires in a grassy area. Tezuka wrote the script for this game since he wrote the scripts for the previous games, and they brought new employee Yoshiaki Kozumi to develop the background story and lore that would be a significant staple of the continued success of the Zelda series, and expanding its ever-growing mythology to this day. Kozumi would go on to become the main producer of the mainline Super Mario series, succeeding Miyamoto after Super Mario Galaxy. Koji Kondo returned to do the music and composed many more tracks compared to the previous 2 games, combined with certain staples that are in every subsequent Zelda game, from the Save Select or Fairy theme, Zelda's Rescue, Evil Priest, Kakariko Village, and the Hyrule Castle themes. The overworld theme from the original makes a grand return. In other words, this game set the musical core for the remainder of the series, and I have carried these themes throughout my life wherever I go. After a few years, The Legend of Zelda Kamigami no Triforce, translated to Triforce of the Gods, was released on the Super Famicom to critical success. It wasn't until another 5 months until the game came out in North America, renamed The Legend of Zelda A Link to the Past, with many Christian or other religious references removed. A Link to the Past not only paved the way for the rest of the series to go, but also greatly expanded on the lore and gameplay, which continued into the 3D era and all of the other subsequent 2D games as well. We begin this game with similar gameplay to the original Legend of Zelda. With the new Super NES gamepad, there are many more inputs that the player can control Link with. We are back to the classical top-down approach from the original Zelda, going not only in 4 directions, but also can move sideways in each direction. Link can also swing his sword with the B button as opposed to merely jabbing, and the Y button is used for a selected item or tool Link will need to use down the line. The A button can be used for picking up and throwing objects and running, while the X button can be used to access the world map, a new feature for the Zelda series. Start button provides access to the item menu like the original game did, and the select button will give you the chance to save and quit your game without you needing to get game over to do so. Let's turn on the game and begin the third Zelda game, A Link to the Past, and yes, there will be spoilers, so tune out and play the game if you haven't. A Link to the Past, like the previous games, starts with a beautiful opening title card, and then begins the prologue segment. The legend goes, a long time ago, there was once a fabled land called the Golden Land, which housed the sacred Triforce, a powerful relic left behind by the 3 goddesses after the creation of Hyrule, the setting of our players. The Golden Land is a hidden land, but due to an evil presence inhabiting it for eons after eons, the land has been corrupted, but that hasn't stopped ambitious people from seeking out this fabled relic. Many enter, but none ever come back. Something sinister and evil has been going on in the Golden Land, and that evil has started to seep into the beautiful land of Hyrule. The king ordered 7 powerful sages to seal the gate to the Golden Land to keep the evil at bay, with the Knights of Hyrule defending them during the process. The gate was sealed, and this conflict has mostly been forgotten and has slipped into legend. Many eons have passed, and Hyrule has been at peace for many years, but the appearance of a wizard priest has put the kibosh on that peace. The priest, a wizard by the name of Agahnim, usurped the throne of Hyrule, bewitching the guards and assassinating the king, hence seizing Hyrule Castle in the center of the land. Agahnim sends out a decree ordering the bewitched soldiers to abduct the descendants of the 7 sages, including the king's daughter, Princess Zelda. Princess Zelda is imprisoned in the castle dungeon, while the descendants of the sages, who happen to be young maidens, are systematically sacrificed on Agahnim's altar in the castle tower, vanish, never to be seen again. Zelda will be the 7th and final sacrifice, and her time is drawing near. Oh wow, what a hell of a prologue with high stakes, and we haven't even started the game yet. We see a save select screen following suit from the previous Zelda, but this time it has its own musical theme for the first time, and it's just a delightful piece. Sometimes I take my time typing my name so I can hear this over and over again. We begin the game in the middle of a stormy night, and Link is in bed. Princess Zelda uses her telepathy to call Link, telling him to rescue her from the dungeon. She states Agahnim has done something to all the other missing girls, and only she remains. Link's uncle wakes him up and tells him he has business, and instructs Link not to leave the house under any circumstances. His uncle leaves, but Link, being a good nephew, follows him to the castle. Zelda tells Link that the guards are under a spell and will attack Link at first sight. She also tells him that in order to enter the castle courtyard, there is a secret entrance on the east side of the castle. Link falls in there and finds his uncle mortally wounded. His uncle tells him that he is the last line of defense not only for Princess Zelda, but for all of Hyrule as well. His uncle entrusts Link with his sword and shield and quietly passes away. Link now has to go into the castle dungeon alone and get the princess out of there. We enter the castle, go either to the left or right wings to access the dungeon. This game is the first top-down Zelda to have different levels or floors, so be mindful of where you fall because you could fall more than a single floor. You go down and see a treasure chest in the middle of the room. This is the first game to incorporate treasure chests to hold secret items. There are small and large treasure chests. Small chests you can open right away, and they usually hold consumable items like bombs, arrows, or rupees, and the dungeon's maps and compasses. The large treasure chests we will see a little later. We make our 3 floors down to fight the swinging ball and spike turnkey and defeat him to release Princess Zelda. Zelda tells us that Agahnim has total control of the castle and fears the worst for her father, but knows a secret way out via the throne room and suggests they leave before Agahnim notices. Zelda follows Link through the castle and they arrive at the throne room. They move the ornamental shelf in the back of the throne room to reveal a secret hidden passage. Link is able to use the torch to light the room up since the passages are pitch black. The passages lead to a sewer system infested with rats and bats, so Link uses the newly received boomerang to stun them and defeat them with his uncle's sword. They go upstairs and reach a room that requires him to pull a lever to open a shut door. To pull a lever, you need to press the A button and the opposite directional button. The door leads into the sanctuary with its priest waiting on the other side of the door. The priest tells us that something mighty malevolent is guiding Aghanim's actions, augmenting his abilities in the process, and the only way to defeat him is to obtain the fabled Master Sword, Evil's Bane. In order to obtain it, Link must seek out Sahasrahla the Elder and a descendant of the Seven Sages, his last known whereabouts being Kakariko Village. Zelda and the priest tell Link that Hyrule won't survive much longer if Agahnim continues his plan to release the seal of the Seven Sages. The priest will hide Zelda, and Link will depart west to Kakariko Village, beginning his adventure. Link arrives in Kakariko, finding hidden treasures including rupees, heart pieces, bottles, and even a bug net from a sick boy. Explore the world of Hyrule to find additional heart pieces, bottles, and rupees to build Link up so that his journey will succeed. Link finds out that Sahasrahla has been missing for some time and looks for anyone that can disclose his whereabouts. As Link is searching, we find out that there is a bounty on Link for kidnapping Princess Zelda from the castle, and that there are some people out there who will report him, so he has to be careful who he talks to. Link talks to a young boy by the potion shop who tells him that the missing elder is in the east, near the Eastern Palace. Link ventures east, braving Octorocks and going up the eastern hills to find a small habitat. Link finally meets Sahasrahla, and the Elder tells him that in order to obtain the Master Sword, he must complete the 3 trials in the 3 different dungeons to obtain the 3 pendants of virtue that represent a different aspect of the Triforce itself: power, wisdom, and courage. He must also be a descendant of the Knights of Hyrule as well. The Elder tells Link that the nearby Eastern Palace should be the first trial he undertakes, and that if he can successfully complete the dungeon and obtain the Pendant of Courage, the Elder has a useful tool to give him and will further elaborate on the legend of the Master Sword. The first dungeon is a maze similar to the labyrinths of the first game, but with more booby traps and monsters. Keys need to be obtained to progress, and chests containing maps and compasses will greatly help Link, but are not necessary for completion. Link comes across a giant treasure chest in the middle of the room, but it is locked. Link needs the big key to open it as well as the room the dungeon boss is located. Link searches and obtains it and opens the first big treasure chest in the game, and revealing the bow and arrow, making a return from the original game. This time, arrows are their own consumable items and don't require a rupee to use like in the original game. They greatly help Link defeat the Red Igors and even the Dungeon Master, the 6 Armos Knights, that try to encircle you and hit you. Link obtains the Pendant of Courage and goes back to the Elder, where he tells Link that there are 2 more pendants to recover. One in the southwest Desert of Mystery, and one in the Tower of Hera on Death Mountain. The Elder gives Link the Pegasus boots that allows Link to run and dash into objects. The Elder sends Link on his way, but before Link goes, he tells the hero that there is an item he should retrieve on the east part of Lake Hylia. That item turns out to be the Ice Rod that can freeze enemies in their place. A useful tool indeed. On to the next pendant. Link arrives in the desert, continually attacked by vultures, or the sand-dwelling Geldmen. Arrives at the desert palace, only to be obstructed by a triad of statues. The inscription in the center of the triad is in ancient Hylian, and is therefore unreadable. An old hermit in a desert cave tells Link that only the Book of Mudora can translate the ancient Hylian characters and is somewhere in Kakariko Village. We backtrack there and find a building with a quill and enter it. The book is on top of a bookshelf. How do we obtain it? Well, maybe dashing into the bookshelf with the Pegasus boots might do the trick. Voila! Link uses it to enter the Desert Palace and is in a big chamber with BMOs placed throughout with their rotating evil eyes just waiting to zap you with their beams. Link needs the ability to lift the white rocks to access the master of the palace, so he obtains the big key and finds the large chest to obtain the power glove, which allows access to places blocked by white rocks and boulders. The power glove is automatically equipped using the A button. Link accesses the upper level of the palace, going through many booby traps and trials to reach the master of the palace, 3 sandworms called landmoliths, to defeat them and obtain the Pendant of Power. Only one pendant left, the Pendant of Wisdom, is in the Tower of Hera on Death Mountain. Before Link sets off to the mountain, the Power Glove has opened up many paths that were previously blocked, so now he can go off in the northeast corner and access the Zoras River. The river is filled with river Zoras that continually attack you and shoot energy shots at you, just like in the original game, and will stop when you meet the big Zora at the Zora's waterfall. For a hefty price, she will sell you the Zora Flippers, which will allow you to swim in the water, since Link could never swim before. You make your way back to the west side of the mountain, where you find the entrance blocked by a boulder. Removing the boulder, you enter the mountain cave and meet a lost old man inside who requests that he accompanies you out of the cave to take him home up the mountain. At his home, the old man thanks you by restoring your health and giving you a magic mirror. He reveals that he has a granddaughter Link's age, but has never returned from her trip to Hyrule Castle, insinuating she's one of the maidens abducted and eliminated by Agahnim. He also tells you need the Moon Pearl going forward up the mountain, but doesn't say why. Link continues his journey and goes up the mountain but comes to a dead end. However, there is a portal of some kind in the center of a triad of rocks and is whisked away to an alternate world that is the same, yet different. Darker. Cold. He sees a bully demon kicking a ball who is also a demon. He realizes he has taken the form of a rabbit instead of a demon, insinuating that Link is not driven by greed or selfish desire, but by courage and a selfless desire to save Hyrule. He takes out the magic mirror and is able to transport back to his world and regain his true form. This time, he materializes on top of Spectacle Rock, now able to access the Tower of Hera. The Tower of Hera is made up of many floors. Therefore, Link will need a map and overlay it to figure out how to access the Moon Pearl in a giant treasure chest out of reach. In order to reach it, he will need to make his way to the 5th floor, avoiding the blue and red hard hat beetles, Guru Guru bars that resemble rotating fire bars in another famous property, and the bumpers that can knock you down a hole, landing on a lower floor, having to backtrack. Link will deal with red and blue blocks obstructing his path and needs to hit the crystal switch to switch between them. In the blue setting, the blue barriers will lower while the red barriers rise and reverse, so some problem solving will be needed. Link will have to figure out which hole to jump to land next to the Moon Pearl chest and obtain it. The Tower Master, a Moldorm, inhabits the top floor, and you have to hit his tail to defeat him and obtain the red pendant, the Pendant of Wisdom. Link makes his way down the mountain and enters the foggy Lost Woods. He enters the Sacred Meadow, where the Master Sword sleeps, and manages to pull the sword out of its pedestal. The fog disappears from the Lost Woods, but Zelda calls to Link in telepathy saying that Agahnim and the soldiers are invading the sanctuary. Eee. Link hurries back to the sanctuary to find Zelda gone and the priest mortally wounded. The priest passes away and Link hurries back to Hyrule Castle, this time accessing the center tower. With the Master Sword, he can destroy the barrier to enter. The enemy soldiers are harder in this part of the castle, and Link has to make his way all the way up to the top of the tower, but he is too late. Agahnim conducts the ritual and makes Zelda vanish like all the other maidens before his eyes. And flees behind the curtains. Link pursues, and they battle. Link cannot directly harm Agahnim even with the Master Sword, therefore the only way to fight back is to deflect his own magic back at him. After 6 hits, Agahnim says he's not ready to admit defeat and sends you to the Dark World. Link finds himself on top of some strange pyramid and notices the possession of the Moon Pearl from the Tower of Hera has protected him, allowing him to maintain his real form in the Dark World. Sahasrahla calls him via telepathy and tells him that there may be a chance the missing maidens in Zelda are alive. They are encased in a crystal scattered throughout the Dark World in even more dangerous dungeons guarded by some of the most vile monsters known on this side of the world. Link has to secure the first maiden in the Eastern Palace of Darkness, literally overlaid in the exact area the Eastern Palace was in the Light World, or Hyrule. This whole Dark World is a parallel version of Hyrule, with everything similar and different at the same time. The monsters here are more dangerous, but Link is able to dispatch them with his Master Sword and makes his way east. In order to access the palace, Link needs to find Kiki the monkey and pay him to follow him, and opens the palace up for him. Entering the palace with a more menacing musical theme, Link traverses it, similar in its layout to its counterpart in Hyrule, but filled with more dangerous creatures like Helmasaurs, Terrapins, and the impassable moles. The item for this dungeon is the hammer, which allows Link to pass the moles and defeat the Terrapins. He makes his way to the boss in the sublevel to find a gigantic Helmasaur king. Link uses the hammer to destroy his helmet while avoiding fireballs and his tail. Hitting him in the head, the Helmasaur king is defeated and Link obtains the first crystal. The maiden is inside the crystal and is able to talk to Link. She reveals that the main culprit for this was Ganon, and that his influence has turned the once beautiful Golden Land into the Dark World. The barrier needs to be opened large enough for Ganon to successfully enter Hyrule with a legion of monsters and conquer it while it is leaderless and in turmoil. The first maiden reveals where all the other maidens are located, and that Princess Zelda is in Turtle Rock up on the eastern part of Death Mountain. May the way of the hero lead to the Triforce. Link with his new hammer is able to access more of the Dark World, making his way to the Swamp Palace where the swamp ruins are in Hyrule. Link drains the water into the ruins and makes his way back to the Dark World. The Swamp Palace is also filled with water and Link can proceed into the dungeon swimming from platform to platform. In this palace, Link obtains the hookshot for the very first time in the series that allows him access to inaccessible areas by grappling a stationary object and pulling Link to the stationary object. He can also grapple things towards him, and that helps him against the Dungeon Master, Argus, a one-eyed jellyfish, and defeats him, rescuing the second maiden. Earlier in his ventures, Link has ventured in the Haunted Grove and sees an apparition of a young boy playing his ocarina, sitting on a tree stump for all the animals, and then vanishes without a trace. The young boy was another individual that sought the golden power but never returned. Link continues his quest and stumbles upon a talking tree in a dying forest grove in the Dark World. This is what the Ocarina Boy ended up as. He tells Link he buried his ocarina in the grove he played and gave Link a shovel to dig it out. Link retrieves the Ocarina and returns it to the boy, but since he's a tree, he can't play it anymore and asks Link to play it one last time for him. The boy petrifies into the tree, leaving this world, and his apparition no longer appears in the light world in a bittersweet goodbye. Link goes to the weathercock in Kakariko and plays the boy's theme for it to spring to life. Now Link can get a ride to different parts of Hyrule right away. Link also finds a blacksmith in the Dark World in the form of a frog and takes him back to Hyrule, where he is reunited with his twin brother. They offer to temper your sword to a shiny red finish, upgrading its attack power. These scenarios perhaps drive Link to complete his mission and reverse the evil that has happened to Hyrule. Link continues his quest and rescues the maidens in the Skull Woods, the Thieves' Hideout, the Ice Palace, and Misery Mire, obtaining the means of reaching Zelda in Turtle Rock Dungeon. The Skull Woods dungeon is made up of several disconnected sections, housing the Fire Rod and a boss called Mothula, occupying an ever-moving room with conveyors and moving spikes while dodging his attacks. A real doozy. The Thieves' Hideout is a unique one that once you reach the boss room, he's not there. You explore and you find the dungeon treasure, the Titan's Mitt, which is an upgrade from the Power Glove in that it will allow you to pick up black rocks and boulders, enabling access to even more areas of Hyrule and the Dark World. You further explore and find a maiden in a dungeon. She wants to go with you, but won't leave the dungeon for some reason. You go upstairs and see a crack in the floor above the boss room and decide to throw a bomb and blow a hole in it. You are suspicious of this maiden having an aversion to light, so you lure her into the boss room with light shining from the hole in the ceiling, revealing her to be the master of the dungeon, Blind the Thief. Blind tries to zap you and shoots fireballs at you from its several floating heads until you defeat him and save the real maiden. The Ice Palace is located where its counterpart, the Fairies' Pond of Happiness Island on Lake Hylia, is located in Hyrule, and Link needs the Titan's Glove to access the portal to get into the palace in the Dark World. The Ice Palace is several floors down, all the way down to B6. The dungeon requires backtracking and landing in the right sections of the floor to access the dungeon item, the Blue Tunic, which improves defenses immeasurably. To access the boss, you need to push a block down the hole to open the door, and that requires you backtrack through the dungeon to do this. The boss, Cold Stare, is in the lowest level of the dungeon and is encased in ice. Melt the ice and then destroy his 3 parts, completing the dungeon. The final dungeon before Turtle Rock requires Link to go to Misery Mire, but it is inaccessible from the outside. The only way in is to go back to Hyrule, blow the Ocarina, and the bird will drop you off on a cliff in the desert. With the Titan's Glove, you can pick up the rock and find a portal to Misery Mire. In order to open the Misery Mire dungeon, you will need the Ether Medallion, and in order to get that, you will need to go up to Death Mountain, and directly west of the Tower of Hera, you will find a headstone with an inscription. Use the Book of Mudora and raise the Master Sword to receive the Ether Medallion. The Ether Medallion will cause all enemies in the immediate area to freeze, an effective use. Use the Ether Medallion in the position marked with its symbol, and the Mire Storm will cease and the dungeon will open. The dungeon is a puzzle with a large room, a maze with multiple rooms and portals used to teleport to access different parts of the dungeon. The dungeon treasure this time is the Red Cane of Samaria, which will create blocks to access doors that need to be continually pressed on to stay open. The dungeon master is called Vitreous, a giant eyeball surrounded by mini eyeballs in a green toxic puddle that will either zap you with lightning or try to hit you directly. Link defeats it and is ready to take on Turtle Rock, the final dungeon holding Princess Zelda. Before Link goes up to Turtle Rock, the bomb shop located in the same position as Link's house in Hyrule has a super bomb that can blow open a tough passage. In this game, unlike the original Zelda, the places you can bomb are indicated on the walls, and when you tap your sword onto it, it'll make a hollow sound. The pyramid in the center of the Dark World has an indication of a hollow wall, but regular bombs won't work, so Link uses the super bomb and it manages to open up an entrance to a portion of the pyramid. Here we find a fairy pond of good luck, where you throw one of your items in and may potentially receive an upgrade. The fairy, due to the Dark World, looks like she has seen better days, and implores you to defeat Ganon after you throw in the arrows. She will give you the silver arrows that is the only means of defeating him. You can also upgrade your sword to its most powerful yellow tempered level. Turtle Rock, here we come. Link sets forth for Turtle Rock, but he needs the Quake Medallion to access the final dungeon holding Princess Zelda. You find the Quake Medallion in the northeast part of the Dark World where Zora's waterfall is in Hyrule, and you throw a stone inside an encircled area surrounded by water stones. A catfish pops out and will give you the Quake Medallion if you leave him alone. The Quake Medallion can cause earthquakes, killing all the enemies in an area. Make your way to the eastern part of Death Mountain. You come across a large elevated platform with stakes in a triad pattern. Hammer them in the proper order to reveal a portal to the Dark World. You are now on top of Turtle Rock. Use the Quake in the indicated position and the entrance will open. In this dungeon, you will need to have the Cane of Samaria to proceed, because it will create platforms to traverse this dungeon. You will have access to multiple rooms and multiple levels. Hence, Turtle Rock Dungeon takes up most of the eastern mountain. There is also a lot of Mario elements in this dungeon, with chain chops guarding a key and door, to pipes taking you to different parts of the dungeon, and the presence of lava. Link finds the big chest and retrieves the mirror shield, which can deflect beams and larger projectiles. Link makes his way to the boss room, this time occupied by Trinex, a three-headed stone turtle with one head shooting ice and one head shooting fire. You will need the fire and ice rods with magic to defeat them, and then the stone shell will burst, exposing the main head's weakness. Slash him until he is defeated. You receive the final crystal, and Princess Zelda is in it. She instructs you to go to Ganon's tower and defeat him. She and the other maidens will use all of their power to destroy the barrier and provide Link access to the tower, the final dungeon of the game. Before you go to deal with Ganon once and for all, there are a few items in the game that are hidden in Hyrule that will aid you but are not needed to proceed. The first one being the Magic Cape. The cape is hidden in the cemetery south of the mountain and east of the sanctuary in Hyrule in a grave surrounded by black rocks. Pick up the black rocks and try to move the headstone. It won't budge, so perhaps dash into it. Voila! Retrieve it to turn invisible and pass through enemies and some obstructions. The Bombos Medallion is the third golden medallion located on a plateau overlooking the Desert of Mystery. Accessing this area from the Dark World and using the Book of Mudora to retrieve it. This will burn all enemies in the immediate vicinity. Finally, go back to Death Mountain in the Dark World. In one of the caves is a long path of spikes, so take plenty of potions or fairies to survive. At the end of the path is the blue cane of Byrna, which will grant you invulnerability as long as the magic meter lasts. Useful items to help newer players, but not necessary for completion. Back to Ganon's Tower. Ganon's Tower is in the Dark World as the counterpart to the Tower of Hera, but even taller and many times more deadly. Every puzzle from all other dungeons is implemented in this final dungeon, with the three bosses from the Hyrule dungeons making a return to hinder Link. Link needs the boss key to proceed up the tower, so he goes to the lower levels to retrieve it and the final big treasure, a red tunic, that will up Link's defense by double from the blue one. Link traverses up the tower using his tools until reaching the 7th floor, where he encounters not Ganon, but Agahnim again. Agahnim says that he is impressed Link got this far, but that there will not be a third fight, so things just got real. Agahnim splits into three and they all shoot simultaneously. Link uses the same strategy as their previous fight to hit the real Agahnim and defeat him once and for all. Agahnim falls, and out of him comes the incorporeal spirit of Ganon, turning into a bat and fleeing. Link uses the Ocarina and calls the bird to pursue him. I thought the bird was only in Hyrule. whatever. The bat flees to the Pyramid of Power and dashes through the top of the pyramid, leaving a large giant hole. Link arrives and falls in the hole to see a fully corporeal Ganon waiting for him, and surprised Link managed to defeat his alter ego Agahnim twice. They fight. Ganon, a formidable boss, wields his trident and throws it at you. His next attack, he uses the trident to whisk flaming bats at Link from circular positions. Ganon cornered, goes invisible, darkening the room and shooting bats at Link. You need magic to light the torches to see Ganon, and then stun him with the sword, and then shoot him with the silver arrows. Repeat this until Ganon is destroyed, once and for all. A chamber opens leading to the Triforce. The Triforce tells Link it can grant any wish or the heart's desire of any individual, and is waiting for a new owner. Link, being of pure heart and altruistic, wishes to reverse the effects of everything Ganon has caused. In an uplifting epilogue, we see the effects of Link's wish. The king comes back to life and is reinstalled as king, with Zelda and the maidens back to their corporeal forms. Link's uncle has come back to life and fully recovers from his injuries. The sage who hid Zelda in the sanctuary recovers and is preaching again. The Ocarina boy comes back and plays again for the animals. Sahasrahla comes back home to Kakariko, reuniting with his wife and grandson, and everyone there warming his welcome. The bully and the ball boy on Death Mountain come back and they become friends playing a game of tag. The Zoras are willing to trade flippers with people, removing the old animosities. The Dwarven Smiths are a successful business. The bug-catching kid recovers from his illness. The lost old man in the mound can traverse the mound without fear of attack, getting ready for a reunion with his lost granddaughter. And finally, Link places the Master Sword back on its pedestal to sleep again, this time, hopefully, forever. That concludes The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past. Wow, what a game! As a child, I was completely blown away by the art style, the dungeon design, the massive world, the great variety of monsters to slay, and characters to talk to. I was also convinced this was the final game in this series, so I was surprised when Zelda 64 was announced later, called Ocarina of Time, to be further elaborated in a future video. This game by itself is such a rich tapestry that went on to be the most influential of all the Zelda games, providing the basic blueprint for a successful Zelda game. The initial linear story-driven path in Hyrule, or the Light World, followed by a less linear second portion of the game in the Dark World, an alternate reality of Hyrule corrupted and twisted, became a staple in some later games. This game was more streamlined than the original Zelda, with a story and less cryptic but more direct communication with the player on where to go and who to talk to. Hence, I was able to complete this game as an 8-year-old before the previous two NES Zelda games. Nostalgia is a major factor in my love for this game, but also has a special place for me as an adult. The idea of there being a payoff just going into a dungeon, learning a new skill so you can access more of the world, provides a heightened sense of progression and accomplishment, one of the appeals the Zelda series has to me. Also, the variety of monsters at varying difficulty levels makes the game fun and keeps you on your toes at all times. There is a great incentive to explore Hyrule and the Dark World because of the many items you can accumulate, whether it be heart pieces or secret tools or magic that will help you in your journey. The surprise and varying end results of secret caves, fountains, or underground lairs makes this a fresh experience from start to finish. The only gripes I have with this game is that Link for some reason has purple hair. Also, I think it should have been a little less direct, but not nearly as vague as the original game, on where to go, And I also think the Dark World crystals should not have had an order number called out on the map. A little more freedom to explore the world would have been better, but I also prefer the structured dungeon and the special treasure each dungeon has. Part of the excitement of playing the dungeon was to fight new monsters, solve new puzzles, and wondering what new tool or ability you will receive there. Oh, and of course, the epic boss battles. This game made the boss battles of each dungeon larger than life, and therefore when you beat them it just feels as epic as any battle would be. Sequels to this game with the same Link include the games Link's Awakening and the Oracle games, originally on Game Boy, respectively, with more adventures and puzzles to solve. I hope they remake the Oracle games with the Switch version of Link's Awakening art style. I want to shout out the original comic I mentioned earlier that appeared in Nintendo Power magazine by Kamen Rider and Cyborg 009 creator Shotaro Ishinomori. The story is mostly the same as the game, but more streamlined with greater personal stakes for Link, as Agahnim not only slays his uncle, but also manages to recapture Zelda right away after they reached the Sanctuary initially. Link's parents were also lost to the Dark World, as his uncle states before he dies, and Link can meet them if he goes there. Link starts off naive, but grows into the hero he becomes at the end. Newer characters were created for this comic, with one character named Rome, who provided the inspiration for Nintendo to create the Rito tribe, the flying race in the Wind Waker, a subject for a future video. Also, there is a legend of the Knights of Hyrule riding giant birds into battle back in legendary times, providing a similarity to the Loftwings and Skyward Sword. There are also two manga adaptations by Akira Himesawa and Ataru Kagive that is mostly the same as the original comic, but with anime-style character design and artwork. The Himesawa one is available outside of Japan, whereas the Kagive one is not. Himesawa manga introduces the character of Ganti, a bandit and companion to Link throughout his journey. Link and his uncle are apple farmers who also happen to know the way of the sword, and the story plays out like Ishinomori's comic. The story for A Link to the Past does not end here. 22 years later, Nintendo made a follow-up to this game called A Link Between Worlds. It was originally to be a remake, but Mr. Miyamoto thought there were enough ideas to make this its own game. A game where you can turn into a painting and move along walls, inspired by Ocarina of Time's Phantom Ganon boss battle. The worlds are mostly the same, with some slight geographical differences, and the time passed is 6 generations, with new incarnations of Link and Zelda, but they reference the hero from A Link to the Past directly. There are no dungeon items, with all the main tools being able to be rented or sold by Ravio, the shopkeep, in an attempt by Nintendo to make the Zelda series non-linear, continuing this further in Breath of the Wild. There is a little theory that in this game, a character named Gramps, who manages the 3DS Street Pass segment of the game, is the legendary Link from A Link to the Past, due to having all the same items as this Link, and will fight you in a similar fashion, and that he's hard as hell. A Link to the Past might be the most important Zelda game ever, and was definitely the success that drove the series for decades, from recurring musical themes, heart piece gathering throughout Hyrule, treasure and treasure chests, and a more straightforward dialogue with the player on what to do and where to go. The game from start to finish continues to make the stakes higher and higher as you go, with the characters and world practically being alive, and you develop emotional investment in the game. The payoff at the end was the most uplifting thing for me, from the epic music to the evil that happened in the game being reversed, leading all the characters to have a happy ending, with evil vanquished ultimately, and the Master Sword resting forever. This game is a prequel to the first 2 games, hence Ganon will eventually return since he is evil incarnate. Emotional investment in the series will continue even further in the next major game in the series, Ocarina of Time, which is a prequel to this one and the next Zelda I will review. From start to finish, The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past provides the perfect escapism, engagement, and fun that every video game player should try at least once in their lifetime, an important part of our culture and one of our many modern myths. Next time, join me as we will be celebrating the 40th anniversary of the ape that made Nintendo a player in the video game industry. Was Donkey Kong inspired by an old cartoon? Or perhaps a classic movie giant? Did he ever make it out of the arcade? Did DK come up with his own rap? All this and more on the next Nerdporial Retrospective, 40 Years of Donkey Kong. Please click the like button, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel. Let's chuck those DK barrels together and find that banana horde. Don't forget your animal buddies either. Keep it Nerdporial, everyone.